Hello, today we will be presenting our Data Analytics Churn Report. I'm Jenna and I will be presenting with Jenna Giuliano and Colin Hoffman. First, I will be going over some basic information surrounding the case. We were provided a large data set from a telecommunications company, and our goal was to develop a predictive model that enhances their ability to identify customers who are likely to churn and leave the company based on the extensive information about each customer. After an overview and analysis of the dataset, we focused on three areas of interest: customer lifestyle, demographics, and call behavior. For customer lifestyle, we found low credit scores, and customers who do respond to mail response are more likely to stay with the company service than churn. Next, we looked at demographic factors. After observing the PRISM data, we noticed that the customer is more likely to churn if they live in a rural area. The last area we looked at was call behavior. When we looked into roaming minutes, we saw that customers who used 100 to 200 minutes were 2 times more likely to churn. We also found customers with one phone and more calls to the retention team led to higher churn. After looking into the dataset further, we noted variables we were interested in based on our three categories. As mentioned, we found low credit scores are more likely to stay with the service than churn, as well as those who do respond to mail offers. For demographics, we found income of the customer to be noteworthy. There is a large amount of income data missing for this variable. This may be important for the company because this missing data could be hiding some important and vital information regarding the churn rate. For call and company behavior, we saw a correlation that if the customer had only one phone, used 100 to 200 minutes, and frequently called the retention team, they were more likely to churn. Once we understood the meanings and importance of our variables, we created our naive model. We decided logistic regression would be the best model and used credit A, credit DE, mail res, ret call, and minutes of usage less than 1,001. The confusion matrix below shows that out of the 1,253 customers that did churn, our model predicted that 850 of the customers would churn. This is a success rate of 67.84%. Alternatively, out of the 37,747 customers that did not churn, our model predicted that 19,182 would not churn. This results in a success rate of 50.82%. Overall, our initial model's average response rate was 50.22%.
So after generating our initial model and these corresponding findings, we began analyzing our methodology and making adjustments to improve our predictive accuracy. So what we did in order to increase this was we increased the amount of predictor variables that we had in our models strategically. And we did this by recombining raw data attributes into new variables, which we'll go over in a moment, as well as using the correlation matrix, operator, and rapid miner in order to see how well our variables correlated with the DV churn depth variable that determined if the customer actually churned or not in order to create our model. On the same note, we also created separate training and test data sets in order to make sure that we weren't training our model on the same data that we were testing it on in order to increase its predictive accuracy. Lastly, we also addressed missing data by removing missing values for certain variables. So this was the case in the sense of the age variable, which was the only one we did this for, which only had 686 values missing out of over 39,000. So we declared and replaced as zeros values for age in order to remove them from our data set. And as I said, in grand total, we determined 26 variables that were highly influential in predicting customer churn. The majority of these came from call and company behavior, that category that we inferred, and we thought that this made a lot of sense because it was directly related to churn as opposed to lifestyle or demographic data that might have come from third-party databases and been more extraneous. And the bolded variables you see on the page here are ones that we recombined in order to raise our predictive accuracy. The first of which is a binary variable called under or over 6 phones for the individual account, and we use this in order to distinguish if we thought this was a household, in which it would be 6 phones or less, or over 6 phones, which we thought would represent a business entity. Additionally, we also have underneath call and company behavior, been with the company for at least 2 years, because we found that this had a high correlation with the churn rate as well, in that customers that had been with the company for over 2 years were much less likely to churn. And lastly on there, at the very bottom of call and company behavior, we have customer has never called retention or customer care team, which is a recombined variable that put together both calls to the retention team and then also calls to the separate customer care team. And we found that when customers had never made a call to either of these entities, they were much less likely to churn. And lastly, on the same note of those 26 variables, these were the 3 variables with the highest correlation coefficients to our DV churn depth variable, which told us if the customer actually churned or not. So the first one on here is 1 year Baker, which was a variable created by Dr. Baker that was binary, and it signified if someone had been with the company for less than 1 year or more than 1 year. Secondly, on there we have RET call, which indicates if a consumer had made a call to the retention team. And then lastly, we have unique subs, which indicated the number of unique subscribers per account.
Our RapidMiner process was broken up into 4 major groupings of operators. First, on the top left, this is where the data pre-processing that did not take place in Excel happened. Next, in the middle section, this is where the logistic regression took place, and our operators leading up to it took care and prepared our split dataset. The top right section operators provided us with analytical tools like the model simulator and our lift chart. And finally, on the bottom, this is where we plugged in the validation sample and prepared the sample exactly how the calibration sample was prepared when we then applied the model to this data and wrote an Excel sheet to provide us with our final predictions. We chose to use an auto model for our final model because it provided us with a baseline that we could then further optimize. It also allowed us to easily identify what predictors were the most important and which of these predictors we could then build our model around. For this task, we also chose logistic regression as our analytic approach. Logistic regression is a predictive analysis which allows for modeling of a binary dependent variable. We found logistic regression to be the most appropriate math model to use because we are working with the dependent variable DV churn depth, which is also a binary dependent variable. We also wanted a model that would account for nonlinear relationships between variables as well. When looking at sensitivity and specificity, our final logistic regression model performed the best overall. Our final model sensitivity was 57.6% and specificity was 62.8%. When you compare this to our initial model with a sensitivity of 48.1% and specificity of 58.6%, you can see the improvement for both measurements. Our final logistic regression model also outperformed our alternative models when it comes to sensitivity, specificity, and overall accuracy. Although our naive Bayes and decision tree models did have high specificities, the sensitivities were really low. These results led us to the conclusion that our final model gave us the best combined measurements for sensitivity and specificity. After analyzing the sensitivity and specificity, our AUC findings were what we expected. Our final logistic regression model performed the best when it came to area under the curve with 0.637. As you can see from the ROC chart and our AUC model comparison graph, we were able to improve upon our initial model and the alternative models. Our initial model's AUC was 0.553, meaning we improved this metric by over 15%. Overall, our final logistic regression model was able to use the test group to achieve an accuracy of 60% against the validation group. This was an improvement of almost 7 percentage points between our initial and final models. Our model also gave us some interesting findings that we would like to share. When looking at the model simulator in RapidMiner, there was almost no scenario where unique subs and active subs weren't the top 2 most important factors when determining churn. This discovery helped us to conclude that the amount of people listed in the account and who are actively using the account are important factors to consider when an action needs to be taken to decrease churn.
So based off of the findings of our final predictive model, as well as these findings of interest, we were able to create 2 customer personas that we think will be of great value to the telecom company moving forward in their efforts to decrease churn. So first of all, on the left-hand portion of the page here, we have Charlie the churner, who is a high-risk individual. So this is somebody that has a smaller family or individual account, has been with the company for less than a year, owns a refurbished phone, and has made a call to the retention team at least once. On the right, we have Nellie the non-churner, which represents attributes that combine to a low-risk individual for the company. So this includes more accounts and active subscribers per account. So the idea of working with a business entity or something along the lines of that. lower credit rating, a longer-term customer, so 2 years or more, owns a new phone, and the minutes of usage is lower than 1,001 minutes monthly. So based off of these personas and then also as well as our predictive model, we've created some recommendations for the telecom company moving forward in order to decrease their churn rate. So first of all, we think it would be wise of them to target larger scale entities and businesses just because we found that individuals and small families were more likely to churn. Additionally, too, we think the telecom company should offer incentives to stay in the first and second year of contract in order to increase loyalty and decrease churn. So this could include offers like additional referral offers, promotional pricing, or a discounted phone upgrade. And lastly, we think that the telecom company should also craft offers to target consumers who place a high value on new phones, because we found these were lower churners as well. So regular upgrades and phone servicing might be additional value adds that contribute to lower churn.
Lastly, I will go over our top 3 key takeaways. Our first takeaway from this project is data analytics is a process that takes time and multiple attempts in order to build a better predictive model. Our next takeaway is that data preprocessing is a crucial first step because it resolves raw data issues such as incomplete values. Our last takeaway is that Auto Model is an excellent tool to use for framework, but it's difficult for practical use. If we were to do something similar to this project in a job setting, we would use Auto Model for reference but build our own model. That way it's easier to explain to managers. And that concludes our presentation. Thank you for listening.